absolutely wonderful morning, magnificent afternoon, and marvelous evening for everyone around the world. And Neville didn't know we were changing that, so that's why you saw the interesting face that he gave about this. Anyway, this is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends. And you guys know Jeanne, you guys know Neville, but we're beginning to bring in new people. And we have Jack Austen from LA, who is also an NLP therapist, actually a master one, I think. He can introduce himself in a moment. We are going to have a wonderful, marvelous conversation about manifesting, not facing joy into the world. No, joy and peace, but also we're bringing it into our world. And our world is really those who are around us. Anyway, I have Jeanne here. And everyone knows that I need to get some things done in the beginning. Hopefully we will be laughing, and hopefully maybe we'll even have to use our timers again like our friend
Jeff
did the other day. Anyway, Jeanne, take over and let me get this show on the road.
Great. Well, it's going to be a great discussion about manifesting joy and peace. And especially during this time, which we often refer to as the holidays, but also getting ready for the new year. So I have some great quotes to kick us off. The first one, everyone creates realities based on their own personal beliefs. These beliefs are so powerful, they can create expansive or entrapping realities over and over. And that's referred to from Kuan Yin, the goddess of mercy, which is venerated by the East Asian Buddhists. I thought that was beautiful because it tells us the strength of our own thoughts when we're talking about manifestation. And then Anthon St. Martin, a destiny coach, wrote, "Dare to dream. If you did not have the capability to make your wildest wishes come true, your mind would not have the capacity to conjure such ideas in the first place."
Excuse me, Jeanne. I think we need to start over again because for some reason, well, keep going. I made a mistake. I'll know in a moment.
That's because you're human. And then the last
robots don't make mistakes. And if they do make mistakes, they just keep doing it. So,
Well, that's part of manifesting joy, because if you admit to a mistake, I know you, Carla, we're going to laugh about it.
Boom.
And I'm laughing at it now. Okay, Jeanne, you can continue talking or...
Well, the last one I wanted to share.
But go on, Jeanne. I need to fix more than I thought I needed to fix.
Okay. Well, the last one I wanted to share is reality is a projection of your thoughts or the things you habitually think. And that's from Stephen Richards, who wrote The Cosmic Ordering Guide. So we start with the Goddess of Mercy telling us that it's our own personal beliefs that are so powerful. Then Anthon telling us it's within our capability to reach our wildest wishes. And then Stephen Richards reminding us that reality is but a prediction of what we're already thinking. So Neville, grandfather, I think your grandchild is now a month old.
6 weeks on Christmas Day. So
great. So
not that we're counting.
Let me kick it over to you. So manifesting joy and peace. How would you kick it off? What are your wise words?
Well, firstly, great quotes. I mean, and it's wonderful to see quotes like this on lots of billboards and up and down corporate corridors, because you'll see them everywhere. But I want to take it back to why beliefs are so important, because there is a psychological equation that not many people know about, but they've all heard. So let me just, and unfortunately, Cameron's not here today because he loves equations, doesn't he, Carla?
Yes, and
I thought I'd do that just to interrupt you so that you get it wrong again. But anyway.
Is that a formula, Neville?
It is a formula, yes. You'll probably finding out I'm a mathematician at heart, but there you go. So here you go. Here is the formula, the equation. Our beliefs and our experiences form our attitude, and our attitude in action is our behavior. And that's the simple psychological formula. No psychologist would disagree with it. Neuroscience have tried to disprove it, and unfortunately, they're not succeeding either. So if you go back to this belief issue, our belief is our reality. And it's as simple as that. And if we want to change our reality to make it more like someone else's reality, then we need to change our belief. And there's a great book out there, by the way, Who Moved My Cheese? I don't know if any of you have.
Oh, yes.
It's a fantastic book. You can read it in an hour and a half because it's short, big letters. And if you're really not into reading, it's on YouTube and it's there for about 15 minutes. It doesn't tell you the whole story of Who Moved My Cheese, but it does hit the main theme home. If you change your belief, you change what you do. And that's really the fundamental part of being happy, joyful, experienced, non-experienced, or what have you, and having peace. So that's my two penneth to kick it off, I suppose. And all the time, I would suggest coaches are trying to help other people close their perception reality gap, because it could be that wide or it could be quite small.
That's very true. Jack, how does that fit with you
Well,
and Carla?
Now keep going. I'll write you a note, Jeanne.
Okay.
Jack.
So I have a little bit of a bias here, and I shared this with Carla on a previous conversation. Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and in that context, he talked about a space between stimulus and response. Now, in the work that I typically do with men, also with women, but focusing on dads of younger children who are entrepreneurs, the distinction shows up just as it did when I was training hostesses in the restaurant business, as widening that gap. Now, contrary to minding the gap, which might be found in London or other locations, the t-shirt joke, sorry. Anyway, the idea about widening the gap. I know you did. You're very quick. Anyway, nonetheless, the key about widening that gap is so that we can have the time to respond versus react. Because one of the things that I see regularly and help people with is the fact that they have such a small gap that that you couldn't put a dendrite between it. It's an almost automated behavior.
Hold on.
Friends, and I'm really happy. Did you turn it off?
Jeanne, you're muted.
No one should be muting themselves. And
I'll unmute once I figure out something here for you, Carla.
I'm fixing part of it now.
We have a co-pilot.
There's a perception reality gap going on here somewhere.
Yeah, you think?
I have no idea. Just go on.
You think this is Santa's hat? This actually is the sorting hat from Harry Potter.
I was thinking you had sorcerers. So yes.
And someone made me a Slytherin today. I can't figure out anything. Go on, just talk and we'll see what happens.
Well, and this is an interesting thing, right? When we're talking about closing the gap or opening a space for response, the common language that we use, repeated often unconsciously, supports pattern behavior. I think you probably, I can see your head nodding, Neville, but the notifications are popping up from chat, so it's blocking my view of you. And that's a challenge because we're typically unconscious of the ways that we reinforce that pattern staying in place, right? And it feeds into things, perceptions of us by others. You know, the subconscious drive to sort someone out and put a label on them as quickly as possible so that we can determine whether or not there's somebody to pay attention to or not, whether they're important in any way or perhaps a threat or a danger or some benefit, right? Put them in a category really quickly and do it subconsciously so you don't notice. And that might be very useful in a really hostile environment, but it becomes really challenging, characteristic, in a very complex world, which we live in, right? And people don't recognize it. I mean, one of the, the common things that I come across in my clients is the fact that very heart-centered, loving people who have not necessarily pursued a certain level of work internally around their awareness are blaming things and not realizing it.
Yep.
And that thus giving that thing power over them and letting that thing, right, which is a conceptual awareness, drive the bus.
I love that you bring that up, Jack, because part of what I talk about when I'm talking to folks, whether I'm coaching them regarding business or communications or whatever that they need at that point, I talk about that stimulus and response. And I explain to them, you get to choose, and that's a superpower. You get to choose. Do you react or do you respond? Reacting meaning chaotic, emotional, shoot from the hip. And I know many people are good at that, but then there's the respond, being thoughtful, deliberate, calm, peace. And then I say to them, that's really the difference of choosing heaven, calm and peace, or hell, chaos and emotion. Without any judgment there. It's just, how you want to show up in the world, and you get to choose. And that's why it's a superpower. So raising my now young adult loving father of my two grandchildren, when he was the chaotic teenager, that's when I learned this power. When I finally said to him, you know what I expect, you know what I want you to do, you know all the dreams I have for you, but right now all the consequences are yours. And that was an eye-opening moment, more so for me than him, because that's when I saw the power that he had over me kind of just come off. And I became the parent again, because I wasn't worried about him embarrassing me, which wasn't something top of mind. I didn't even know I was worried about it. And, he was maybe about 13 at the time. And I was like, okay, so if you get in trouble at school, I'm just going to show up and be your parent. And in other words, if you're suspended, you're suspended. There's no questions. You're going to be suspended, and you're going to spend those 3 days with your grandparents. And he just looked at me like, what do I do now? Because that power that he had subconsciously over me, keeping me, rooted in that one pattern, just dissipated. And it was one decision, one tiny little decision to say to myself, he's old enough to have the consequences and he can own them. So that stimulus and response thing is extremely powerful. So thank you for bringing that up. When it comes to then manifesting joy and peace, we get to choose, like I said, heaven, joy, peace, all of the good that we have, or not. And that brings something I read this week, and I wish I had written it down, was from an Indian guru. And he basically said, we spend all of our time trying to fix ourselves, to find those imperfections and fix them. And it's the wrong place to put our energy. We should be putting our energy on recognizing that we have everything we ever need already in our minds and already in our hearts. And we should be working to take out the doubt. And I thought about that for a couple of days and was like, interesting. It's a different way of thinking.
It sounds like the foundations of Coachville back in the day when coaching was becoming a thing, right? This was a fundamental idea that we already have it within us. And if we hold that awareness towards our clients and we create a container for them, their insights are going to be profound. And I mean, I know that in my particular case, I recertified in NLP in order to try to convince myself that I should be more confident than I was behaving with that skill set. And when I let that go more completely and just allowed myself to incorporate what I'd already learned consciously in an unconscious way for the positive benefit of my client, for the mutual benefit of all, things changed.
It's amazing how subtle things can change. You know, when we make a certain decision, I'll tell you, I'm a Toastmaster, and after spending 40 years training people how to speak and working on messaging and coaching executives on how to basically how to show up in the world and exude the leadership that they had, I found myself in a quandary when I was off to start something on my own. And I sat down to write a blog post, and everything I wrote, I was like, oh, that's so terrible. And I erase it and then go start again. And when I was reading it, I go, God, that sounds pompous. You know, who do you think you are? I mean, literally that voice was so strong that I couldn't write. And I was talking to someone and they said, you know, you might go to Toastmasters. And I remember thinking, oh, no. I sent people to Toastmasters, you know, to get their confidence up, but I never thought about it for me. And that's when I realized it had nothing to do with what my expectations of Toastmasters was. I had to rethink everything. And I ended up going to a couple of meetings, and I realized if you want to find your voice, you need to have a place to practice and to get that gentle feedback that they give you, or not so gentle sometimes, but you know, I call it our patented evaluations. And I found my voice, and I found a way to put my thoughts so I didn't have that reaction. So inside my head, that particular voice has a way of keeping me down. You know, like the quote said, many of the quotes that I read over the last thing, it's your thoughts and the things that you habitually think about. You can use those to keep yourself down, or you could use those to extend yourself broader. And once I had that, it was another switch. You know, I actually said to somebody in my Toastmasters group, I always believed nobody wanted to hear what I had to say, which goes back to, you know, my parents when we were all yelling at the table, and my dad would actually say, nobody needs to hear from you, or something like that. And this woman and another woman that were in my car, they heard that and they went, stop. there are two women in this car that want to hear what you have to say. And that changed again. It was a very subtle change. So when I spoke that day, it was a completely different experience for me. And I wish, one of those wild wishes that we can always let loose, according to Anthon St. Martin, I wish everyone could let loose of those internal boundaries, because to manifest joy and to manifest peace, we have to remind ourselves the mind is an extremely powerful engine. It's more powerful than the biggest supercomputers we have in the world. Each one of us has more power than the newest Intel microchip. And we need to allow ourselves to accept that, what we bring, even though there are 2 million of people in the world that say they do what I do, there's only one me, because all of the things that went into making me who I am today, the good things and the not so good things, the challenges and the wins, that makes me unique in how I see the world. And I process things differently, using the Intel chip as an example. You know, you might have 1 million, 2 million chips, but if the programming is different, that's a unique chip. And that's, each of us has different programming, and we need to undo some of that. I had a meditation coach who used to say, we need to undo the human condition. And I used to look at him and go, what? Undo the human condition? But what he was talking about was the programming that we grew up with, and learn to listen to that still small voice to guide us. Neville, go ahead, Jack.
I just noticed that there's sort of like 3 different topics there, that all of which I wanted to respond to. And because I was not reacting, I didn't speak up. And so I have a personal experience around this as well. And it's sort of twofold, right? When it comes to speaking, I had an emotional trauma when I was about 5 years old, and I was very excited, and I came home to my parents, and they were fighting about money, and I wasn't really conscious of that at the time. I had no real awareness of it, because I was completely occupied with being afraid of being beaten up by some older boys. And when I tried to share with my parents what it was that I was so upset about, they told me that I was unintelligible and sent me off to the bathroom to clean up. And that was a pivotal thing. I then later in 5th grade had Guillain-Barré and was on a respirator for 2.5 weeks, fully paralyzed. And I could not speak. I had a tracheotomy and I could not speak. And those two have led to some very curious internal wiring around speaking, and a sort of very early expression of sort of tending to be dominant, and then getting such negative feedback that I withdrew. So the tendency for me still, that I have the opportunity to deal with on a daily basis, is to not hide and to not be so self-critical of how I speak and how important that is, because the enunciation is like, I had to learn it again at, in 5th grade, at whatever that was, 10 years old. And I think that there are experiences that we all have that are layered in these ways. And we get to wake up to that. We get to wake up to the fact that it isn't a flaw, it's an adaptation. And most of us did it subconsciously.
That's very true and enlightening, because I've heard it over and over. It's like an onion, peeling an onion. You take one layer off and other things bubble up. The one thing that I want to just put out here is we often talk about things like post-traumatic stress. And a lot of times I see people downplaying post-traumatic stress because they're like, no, you're not, you didn't go to war. That's not really trauma, but it's trauma at the age that it happened and how you perceived it at the age that it happened. And that's how you hold on to it. And that's how you have to deal with it, by recognizing as a 5-year-old, you had something you needed to say and you were shoved aside. I had a similar reaction, not quite as dramatic, but something happened and I ran home to mom around the same age and she was like, "You're too young for that." And I remember as an adult thinking, that's why I'm always thinking I'm too young, without even with those words, "You're too young to know this," or "You're too young to do this." I could be 80 years old and still feel I'm too young. And I have to go back to that inner child and go, it's okay, I'm here, I'm in charge.
Okay, guys, let's bring Neville into the conversation.
I was just doing that.
Okay, because I'm trying to fix this issue, but remember the 2-minute rule?
The 2-minute rule? What 2-minute rule? Is that when you drop something on the floor and you've got 2 minutes to pick it up, or what?
Absolutely,
okay,
that's it.
That's the 5-second rule. That is the 5-second rule. 5
Not
seconds.
at my university. I'm laughing. I shouldn't be laughing. Jack, that was one hell of a story. And I felt your pain. And you are a little bit like me. When you were 5 was a long, long time ago.
Yes.
And the thing about what you were saying there, and what Jeannie's been saying is it stays in the memory. And because we are, there was a phrase many years ago, "Give me a boy before he's 7, I'll show you the man." I'm not quite sure who made that comment, but
I know.
Well, allegedly, I'll agree with you.
It was a Catholic priest, and he happened to be of a specific Jesuit order.
But the point is, in many respects, that's very true, because those are our formative years of being a sponge. Yeah. And the unfortunate part about being a sponge is that not everything that we learn is happy, let's say. And Jeannie, you mentioned... Sorry, say again.
Very contradictory things.
It is. And Jeannie, you mentioned PTSD. You don't get that from the war. I mean... I was kicked off a group about 6 months ago, a panel discussion, because this similar discussion was going ahead, and I called it a form of behavioural waste. So I explained what behavioural waste was, and then I said, and this form of behavioural waste is parental PTSD. Well, you should have seen the panel wake up. They're all parents, right. And they all, like you did, Jack, someone in the back of their memory said, "Don't do that. You can't do that. You're not allowed to do that." And boy, did you see, it was like incoming. I had to have the shields up full. I felt like Captain Kirk of the Starship Enterprise.
Neville, I have, just let me insert real quickly. I have a group on Facebook called Guilt-Free Fatherhood Unlocked. So not enormously popular, but it speaks the truth to the clients. It speaks the truth,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and we've all done it as parents, thinking we're doing the right thing. There isn't you must do this as a parent. And we all talk about Dr. Seuss was probably one of those that started to bring parenting to the fore. And I try and steer away from all these parenting groups for the simple reason is I know I made some hell of a mistakes, but I've been making up for it over time. And now having our first grandchild, I now understand, it's great being a grandparent because you can always give them back. Which is a great phrase, really. Until you get there, I don't think you probably understand what the phrase is. But let's go back a little bit, because what I heard here was imposter syndrome, and maybe your NLP journey, Jack, has alleviated the imposter syndrome. You really are a smart guy and you do know what you're saying and you should be listened to. And Jeannie, maybe Toastmasters was your imposter syndrome breakthrough. I don't like the phrase imposter syndrome, frankly, because you're always going to be an imposter somewhere. If that's your first trip, you're probably apprehensive. You're probably got high expectations. You're excited, but nonetheless, you think, "What am I doing here? Why am I here?" And you just got to get over it.
Neville and Jeanne and Carla, you are all so bright. I'm sure you could guess that I got a degree in philosophy. Unfortunately, I didn't choose humor as the outlet for that because clearly John Cleese has done better than I
Absolutely.
in humoring the world with his insights. And just silly walk or other such skits. But nonetheless, the pursuit as a child was from my wounding and unavailable for me in the perception that I had at the time, because what looked real, what seemed inevitable, was the power my parents had over me and how they were so incredibly focused on how I looked to the world as a reflection on them, almost exclusively. They did not know how to care for me in a nurturing way. And we hear a lot of talk about empaths and things of that nature. And I do have a very empathic characteristic, but I was overcompensating for my fear of not being enough. The question consistently in my mind was, there's something wrong with me and they simply won't tell me what it is. And now if you want a fixing syndrome of oneself, that'll start it. You can have a neuroticism around trying to get those characteristics, which are just characteristics, corrected against some theoretically perfect template, which we all, I think, have acknowledged doesn't exist. There is no perfection but what has already been created. And God does not make junk, as they say in the rooms of AA.
You can make God laugh.
Oh, you could.
Yeah, I love to make God laugh because I'm always making plans.
We might have another discussion on that at a later date. But,
I don't know that we need to go to theism particularly, but you know, what I was referencing in essence, right, because of the power of what Jeanne was saying. You know, once upon a time in the United States, there were some very wise people who were expanding their consciousness around religion. Thoreau, perhaps, as one of said individuals, but there was this character by the name of Walt Whitman, and he said thing, "I sing the body electric." And if you look at Joe Dispenza right now, he'll tell you that there are a minimum of 55 trillion cells in the body. And if you look at the charge on them, they're 0.7 volts. We are a superpower station walking the streets unaware that we have infinite access to infinite power because we cannot separate ourselves from the field. We are part of the darn field. This mind-body idea that this separation is a function of the left lobe of the brain's analyzing analysis ad infinitum.
Yeah,
it's so true. I mean, what we do know about complexity theory, for instance, is the brain is a classic example of complexity theory. Namely, and you said it earlier, Jeanne, you just made one small change. You effectively took away your son's power. How you did that was literally said, you're responsible. You know, you're responsible for the consequences that come your way. And in many respects, that is a really small change, but it has a huge impact. And that's what complexity theory is all about. It's lots of what ifs that are totally interconnected, that someone at the top of their game is doing this intuitively. And I think this is where I want to bring sports people into this arena, because ultimately, when we're subconsciously, I don't like calling it unconscious competence because I'm not quite sure. Subconscious competence, I'll go to, but even I've reverted to what the psychologists say as unconscious competence. People at the top of their game in the sports arena are doing this out of reaction. And it's a reaction that they've done time and time and time again. They've practiced the game plays off the field, and they can adjust those game plays in NFL, whatever you want to do, in NBA, in ice hockey, in football, in cricket, in rugby. All of the people at the top of their game literally adjust to the context that's in front of them. But they've done it time and time and time again, that none of it feels unnatural. And they come off the field exhausted because they put everything, you know what they say about, you've left everything on the field?
Yes, absolutely.
And that's so true. And unfortunately, they know what their personal best is. And the majority of people have no idea what their personal best is because they've never made it. They've never assessed it. They've never measured themselves from their own personal best previously.
This is a notoriously dangerous topic.
Yeah, I know. I like being dangerous.
Self-measurement. But sorry, that didn't might not have come across properly.
No. I got it. That's fine.
Sorry, my brain went somewhere else. I think there's a distinction there too, Neville, around what's reflexive and what's conditioned on purpose.
Yep, definitely.
Because when you take what you're already good at and you enhance it by deepening the embodiment of that skill to the point where it's a subconscious or unconscious competence at a higher level, you end up with people like Messi.
Yep.
Right. It's what, there's so much power in this. And so, what I typically do, and it's difficult to explain to people, but the insights of NLP helped me witness people's strengths. So there's a lot of times things that I don't have to teach my clients to do that are part of a sort of protocol to get them back on track. And one of those key things is to recognize what they're already great at and that they may not be aware of, and they're probably not practicing in this moment because for some reason life has called on them in a way where they think they need to compensate by being a pleaser to others or, taking house calls or whatever and not charging more, or basically letting a business run them rather than being aware of what they're already great at and using what got them to where they are in the first place at a different level for their own enhancement, for other people's enhancement in a way that's easy, that they don't have to relearn or fix anything, but amplify what is already good and then just subtract a few things. Right? We're always adding and additive everything. When we go back to the formula, if we start subtracting some stuff, it gets a lot simpler faster.
Jeanne, you were going to say?
I'd like to jump in. There's a middle ground that's missing, I think, between being parented and being an adult. And part of that, what did you call it? Parental PTSD. I love that, by the way.
They didn't, so whatever.
Parents do what they know best. There absolutely is not an owner's manual. There are a lot of books out there, and some of them are okay, and some of them maybe not so okay. But there really isn't an owner's manual on how to raise a kid. And what I learned in that moment with my son was my mother didn't let go of the reins and didn't let me have my own power until I was in my early 20s, when I stood up and said, I'm in charge. And, that was a pivotal moment, but I still have to undo a lot from before. With my son, I was giving him the reins then to make decisions and reap the joys or the consequences. And that's a skill set that's not in the parenting manual. So during the time, at the same time that happened, I actually changed my relationship with my mother a little bit, because it was easier, because she didn't have the same power over me. And that's the part that we need to work on, is to realize that we're in charge. And it's like there's a middle ground from parenting young kids. And that's when you say things like, you need to sit down and be polite, or, whatever it is our parents said, nobody wants to hear from you right now, is something I'm sure was said in the heat of the moment, but I heard it and I remembered it. They don't have control over how we perceive it, even as children. But there's a point where we need to allow kids to take that personal power back and teach them how to use it. That we don't do, because we're so freaking, left-brained about how we do things, that we forget that there's this right brain, and we need to be a little bit more expansive and creative. And once we understand we need to take the reins from ourselves, then we can start retraining how we think, right? And understanding, I don't need to go get yet another certification to be a great business and personal coach. I actually have this thing called life experience, I make jokes from time to time that I have a PhD in weight loss. And doctors will go, really, where did you go? And I'm like, and I laugh. I go, doctor, I've been studying this since longer than you were alive. Because I've been on every freaking diet they have. So I'm now an expert on weight loss. Not that it worked or anything.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you.
It's the same thing. I'm an expert at parenting, because I raised a kid. He went through life. He's now finally off on his own, and he's got 2 kids of his own, and it makes me an expert. Maybe not the expert you need, but and Nigel, there is a bumper sticker you need to find. It says, if I knew grandparenting was so much fun, I would have skipped the kids. Because you get to be with your grandchildren.
Not sure that there might be some reflexive action that needed to occur in the middle of that experience in order for there to be.
Well, what Dad,
like 30 years.
Unless you marry them, you can marry into grandchildren.
My dad had that bumper sticker on his car, and I drove up and I saw
That's
it.
hilarious.
And I was just like, I remember sitting in the car going, thanks, Dad. The point is, we get to put the spotlight where it belongs, but oftentimes we haven't been taught where it belongs, so we kind of feel our way through it. And that's when we start to peel the onion and we see all these obstacles, but we weren't always taught how to get around. We were taught to go right through, and that's a hard way to do it, especially if the obstacles are, big cement piles. We weren't taught to be nimble and go around, and that's what we need to be teaching. And by teaching ourselves. If I want to manifest greatness, I need to recognize that I'm already greatness. If I want to manifest joy, I need to remind myself that I am joyful. I need to remind myself that life is a 4-letter word, but that's an okay thing. Not all 4-letter words are bad.
You're bringing it back to yourself, and that's where people shy away from, because they don't really want to know who they are. And I'm sure, Jack, in your coaching sessions, when you make them aware of something that's really rather simple, common sense, let's say, they go, well, why didn't I think of that? Well, you didn't think of it because you didn't want to think of it. And
Well,
just one other, before you jump in, one other comment, Jeanne, right? There are lots of books written about how to raise a kid, thousands of them, but there's not one that has the right to have been written, How to Raise My Kid, because that's the book you have got to write, because everyone's different. We're all different. And this is why, once you want to tear the onion skins off and unlearn and relearn, that's where you got to start. You can all see even today, I see examples when I go shopping, parents that are at the end of their tether and the child is literally strapped into the trolley going round a supermarket. And the parent is not putting them close to the shelves, which is where the marketing people want you to be. Because if you put your child in a trolley, guess what? All the great things that kids want to eat are at that level.
Mm-hmm.
These marketing experts are not stupid. So all the expensive cereals, all the sugar-rich, enhanced, drinks are all at that level. And what you as a parent have got to do is wake up to that and say, my child is going to know how to choose. And sadly, that's a really tough thing to do when you're very young. But anyway, there's a bombshell for you.
Neville, you may know this answer. I mean, was Edward Bernays grandson of Freud or nephew?
I don't think a grandson.
Okay, but anyway, the point of the matter being that those insights taken into public relations and marketing, advertising,
Yep.
have led to some of the most manipulative, subconscious twisting of minds that has ever existed.
I mean, you must remember when films...
It's kindly propaganda versus Goebbels.
He was a nephew.
It's the same thing.
He was a nephew.
Yeah, I didn't think he was grandson. But the interesting thing, Jack, is there was a big legal case in the UK. Well, we're probably going back 14, 15 years now, where you would go to the cinema and before the film came in, you saw lots of other reels of, coming soon, next on this show. And in between each of those reels, and even interspersed in those reels, was one picture: popcorn, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, hot dogs.
Yep.
And the subconscious mind or unconscious mind, depending on which way you want to look at it, picked it up. And people were being manipulated. And even today, we're being manipulated by adverts.
By the way, none of us are using the proper term. I believe currently in PhD programs, it's non-conscious.
Non-conscious. Okay.
Non-conscious, yes. It's much more neutral.
So we have another word to put in there.
It's the same.
It's
the same fundamental.
It's just a new word.
It's just a historical, Freud used the subconscious as his, but I'm going to butcher this quote, but it's from Carl Jung, and it's effectively, until we make the unconscious conscious, we will see the outpicturing of our worlds as destiny. So our internal filters, the way that we have interpreted whatever our experience was in our own subjective organization, creates a filter that we then project upon the world and then teach the world how to treat us and function in the world as though it was an accurate map, which it is not. Right? Only living in the present as fully as one is capable can possibly give us an accurate reading of whatever it is that's happening. And that's going to have some fumbling with it. Now, there's some historical stuff around fumbling to ecstasy, but that's I think that's a slightly different frame of reference.
And following on from that, you've got William James, who's supposedly the father of modern psychology, and he said very simply, the greatest discovery of our generation is that human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their mind, can change the outer aspects of their lives. Now, it's a simple thing to say, maybe. It's on our website, so we say it quite a lot. But the simple, yeah, as you can see, it was pretty well rehearsed. but guys, it's true. You change what you believe, you change what you see, you change how you think about things, you change what you do. So it really is, again, a bit of common sense. And even before that, Aristotle said, leadership is a habit. And guess what? It can be a good habit or a bad habit.
And Plato had this weird myth about the cave and everybody looking at the shadows.
Now that's another one, isn't it? That's a brilliant one. No, I should put that on the website because a lot of people could talk about that these days. But yeah, exactly. What you see is reality. Only when you challenge what you see. What
you perceive is reality to
Absolutely.
You. And so one of my mentors in the UK it says this now, and so it's a twisting of the Teilhard de Chardin quote that we're not having a human experience of spirituality, but a spiritual experience of humanity, right? Effectively, that's again butchered, but he said, but instead it's 7.5 billion consciousnesses having that experience, because there are that many realities, because everybody's perception is different, and everybody has a bias by the software, wetware, whatever model one wants to look at, that is egoically described as survival. We are trying to repeat unconsciously what worked yesterday, which leads to Groundhog's Day and really actually requires, some significant breaking of rules, internal ones, in order to be able to shift the reality we're manifesting, because otherwise it's going to look very, very similar to what yesterday held.
Yeah, and I'm sure you know the sort of SME mantra or the marketing mantra is, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And the interesting thing is, that's fine, but you don't live in a perfect world anymore. I mean, certainly in my lifetime, that phrase may have been around, but it doesn't work. It might work for a retailer on a high street that requires footfall, and they get so much footfall, they're just doing the same thing. We make bread, people want to eat bread. Our bread is great, people will come and buy bread. Yeah, I can understand it for that, but go elsewhere in the world where it's down to more than personal choice. That's never going to happen. And people still keep locking into this old way of thinking. Well, wake up, guys. It's the 21st century and AI is there. The Internet of Things is there. We can get really complicated here if you like, but we'll just scratch the surface. But coming back to what you've both said is we've got a very powerful engine in between our ears. It's approximately 5 inches wide and about 7 inches deep. And the majority of people don't use it.
And it's thickly wired with connections.
Yeah. Yep.
We use it, and it's like breathing. You were talking about how sportsmen do things over and over and over, and it becomes a reflex. That's called muscle memory to me. And we breathe up here, because that's breathing to live. But if we could breathe all the way down, then we can, and then we breathe to be logical, to be thoughtful. We can get out of the fight or flight issue that we're always in. And so that takes a consciousness for breathing. And it's the same with the brain. We allow the brain to do as much as it needs to do to keep us safe and to keep us alive. But my father used to say things like engage brain before opening mouth. In other words, think before you speak. And I now have learned that taking that deep breath and taking a moment to, what I like to remind people, to ground yourself, to stay who you are, but it moves your thinking from the monkey brain, the amygdala, which is the fight or flight or freeze, to the frontal lobe, which allows you to be more logical and think through. But we don't always engage that part because we're kind of sleepwalking a lot of times. We're doing things reflexively. And when we stop and we have a conversation like this, then we go, oh yeah, there's more to it. I mean, it's like riding a really, really well-trained Arabian horse. Not every horseman can get on an Arabian horse or a thoroughbred, because these are very spirited animals. But when you give them the full rein, they can take you to great distances, and it would be a really enjoyable ride. But if you keep holding the rein in, you're going to fight and not necessarily have the enjoyable ride. But if you let the rein go, so I actually need to tip my hat to Elon Musk when he said, maybe we're just, in somebody else's virtual world. When he said that, I thought, God, he must be smoking something good. But in reality, when you talk about 7.5 billion different perceptions of reality, we are in somebody else's virtual world. We are what we perceive and we accept. I often will think, like, is this color blue the same that you're seeing as far as color blue? Because as we start to look at perceptions, it could be very different. How my eye reflects the colors in my own mind can be completely different. So you might be seeing a more yellow blue when I'm seeing a more red blue, because of how which is why I always say I like my rose-colored glasses. I like to see things in a more positive way. So I do color things differently.
Well, and Jeanne, I think one of the points that you're getting at is that you're creating your own internal shock absorber. You're making your own weather on purpose.
So being a fellow Californian, I'm glad you didn't go into the whole fire tornado thing.
Well, okay. So
we're creating maps. We create our own maps.
You guys have had more of that experience than we have here in Southern California.
Yeah.
I grew up with forest fires field fires on a regular basis. When I was in 5th grade, at the same place where I was located, we shared a partition, a figmentary divider with Camp Pendleton, and it was during the Vietnam War still. And so they were doing live fire activities on a regular basis every summer, and school started back again in September, which meant it had the entire 3.5 month, 4 month, 5 month period to dry everything out without any rain. And I remember days so thick with smoke that ash was falling all over the schoolyard. And not only that, but the school that I went to was condemned, and we were still using it because this community was so small, they hadn't been able to raise the funds to build a new one yet.
Carla, you were going to say something?
I've been trying to say something for about 10 minutes now.
For once, we kept you quiet.
Well, don't make me react to that. I'm being very mindful. The show has been on and off air with the wrong titles, the wrong everything. And it took me a long time to fix it. And hopefully people know we're here. I have no idea anymore what's going on. But when we talk about this, I think we forget often, and you're getting to the point that I think is very important, is that I speak to people in English every day. I speak to English speakers like Neville and Jeanne, and I speak all of us today. And I speak to people who don't necessarily understand English at all. And everyone speaks. And everyone uses words differently. And I think we need to take that into consideration when we're even having an argument with someone. Because we may actually be saying the same exact thing, but using different words. And we forget that. We lose ourselves in our own train of thinking, in our own manner of living, that we don't really hear each other. And I say this often on the English show. Listen, open up your ears, guys. And it goes much further than just saying the word listen. It goes deep into your mindset and who you are. And it's so very, very important. I remember many times having a conversation with someone and they're saying one thing and I'm saying another, and I think we're not saying the same thing. And then it dawns on me, hey, we're saying the same thing, but in different words. And the person looks at me and says, no, we're not. And I'm like, yes, we are. And this is a really important thing for everyone to begin to bring into their thinking. It could stop all the war in the world. It could stop the poverty. It could stop a lot of stuff. But we don't listen to ourselves or anyone else. We just keep going in our own world. And with that, you guys can respond, but we are getting to the end of this.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that quickly. There is research out there that was done by a major multinational corporation with their staff. They had hundreds of thousands of people, and they found that their workforce was wasting 17 hours a week trying to undo miscommunication. 17 hours a week, that's nearly half the work week. And so when we start to listen and make sure we understand what's being asked of us, we could become more productive. And as you said, change the idea of what warfare is. You know, we telegraph what it is that we want, but we don't always want to hear what other people want. And, you know, I think it was Stephen Covey who said, we listen to respond, we don't listen to understand. Bringing that back around to manifestation for joy and peace, that inner voice that we don't listen to, the one that's so quiet that there's too much interference for us to hear. All that voice wants is for us to understand our own greatness and what we can bring to the world. And it's learning the lesson to listen to ourselves that will make the difference in the next year. When we listen to ourselves and allow ourselves to unleash that great talent that we have, whether it's listening, whether it's writing, whether it's going to work every day, whether it's hugging a kid or just simply smiling. You know this, Carla, firsthand. When we smile at each other, we touch somebody and we don't even know. We have no idea what we've done to change their life. And there's a little story. The beginning of my career, I took a phone call from somebody who said, I want to get into public relations, but I don't know how. And I remember talking this person through. I was in my 20s, so I thought he was ancient because he was like 45 years old. And but I listened and I said, try taking some classes in writing, especially journalism. And he called back a year later. I had no idea that this would happen. He called back a year later and got me and said, thank you, because I changed how he went about finding his next job, and he did get a job in PR, but he did take the class. I didn't know that's what he would do. I just offered a piece of advice when he asked. So when we pay attention to our own inner self, as well as to those around us, we change the waves around us. We change the electricity, as Nigel, I think you were talking about. And those little subtle changes make massive differences in the world. It's that butterfly effect.
Talking about that butterfly effect, we talk to people all the time. And, I used to think, oh, I need to be physically near a person to be close to them. And in the past few years, I realized, no, you don't need to, because what makes us close to each other is not the physical being that we are, but it's our thought patterns and what we are vibrating. And I've seen through the years that I have changed my group of friends. Very often I'll be with this group and I'll get bored or I'll grow out of it and I move on to the next group. And that happens with everyone. But are we any further from each other than from the time that we were close and in contact all the time? Or is this something that grows as we become more of ourselves? And I really like a book that I haven't completely read, Neville, but at least I've started and I've read parts. Everything you wanted to know you should have learned in school but didn't, something like that is the title.
Robert Fulgham.
No. Quiet for a moment. And everything you should have learned at school but didn't. And that happens all the time. And the parts that I read that I really liked, Neville, was that everyone was basically saying the same thing, but in a different pattern. We're all saying, trust in ourselves, listen to our inner self, insert in different ways. And that's the beauty of that book. And Neville, if you want to do a quick plug, and I mean a quick plug, I'll let you do it.
Sure, it's free. Check me out on Facebook and you see the download.
Great. And
there you
then
go. How's that for a plug?
That's a perfect plug. And Jack, do you want to say any last words?
That sounds a bit final, but nonetheless, I'm not ready for that quite yet today, but who knows? I'm not sure I have full control over that.
Come and sit on Santa's knee, Jack. Here you go.
Hey, you're looking at it in a different way than I meant it.
Well, and I did that on purpose, right? Because one of the things that I came away from, from philosophy that I think is ongoing truth, speaks to what you've been talking about, and that is, first define your terms, because we have to know that we're talking about the same thing. I mean, people are not aware that there is no way for us to speak directly about what it is that we're experiencing, because we do not have direct experience about anything, and language is at best, tertiary experience, right? So everything's metaphorical, and all of the greatest teachers spoke in metaphor. But a lot of times people take that literally and think that they're literally talking about, a camel and a needle, and then they start doing an expression about, well, actually that's a metaphorical experience and blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah. And if you do the historical study, you find out that there is a place called the Eye of the Needle that was through the wall that you had to pass in order to make sure that you were not armed and were not dangerous. So The literal meaning at the time of the phrasing is very different than how it's taken metaphorically now and utilized to teach a lesson that isn't necessarily the one that was being taught. So we have to actually stay in wonderment, which is, I think, one of the better definitions of the study of philosophy, is being in wonder about what it is that we have in front of us here so that we can stay in that state that is more like joy and love.
And I love that, because that's what we're really looking for, is living in the state of joy and love and nothing else. Jeanne, I'm sure I'm forgetting to say something. I'm totally all over the place with getting this show on air today.
Well, first, the practical. When you see us on Facebook on the MindPlore with Carla page, or on YouTube with Gigglefest University, it's the MindPlore playlist. Please comment and please subscribe on YouTube. We're trying to grow our subscriptions. And if you can, share this out to everybody in your network, because that's how we get this great bunch of wisdom together. I'm tweeting out, we're dropping a lot of advice in this one, guys. Jump in and dig. But I just want to remind people that, again, we have the most complex and smart microprocessor already, as Neville said, in the 5 inches by 7 inches part of our head. We have so much wisdom already that we simply have to remember who we are. And who we are human beings, not human doings. So if you find yourself so busy that you can't think, then it's time to take a second to stop, take a deep breath, and just listen. And listen to yourself, because the wisdom is there. The great wisdom from the ancient times to the wisdom that will come out in the future is all in there at once. And that's how we manifest joy and peace, by listening and acting and responding in peace and joy and love.
And actually, if we think about that, everyone has it in them. There's a fountain of joy within. I love the lecture by Sri Ravi Shankar when he's talking about the fountain of joy. It's there, it's within you. And you yourself can access it at any time. You just need to close your eyes and go into your inner world. And that inner world is there for everyone. And it's peaceful and it's joyous, and you can make it happen throughout the world. And with this, we have been on air for over an hour, and I hope that people will not be annoyed with me about keeping them so long. It's been a wonderful chat. I know I missed some of it because I was putting everything back on air. I just want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And if you feel valued to anything that I've been doing on Facebook, go to my Patreon page, patreon.com/GiggleLady, and see what it offers. We don't literally have MindPlore there yet, but make a donation to help us stay on air. It would be greatly appreciated. And Jeanne, you know how hard that was for me to do, but I did it. Having said,
hey, Carla, Wikipedia do it, and people subscribe to Wikipedia. So the important thing is people need to realize that this is coming out of your pocket. So, it's your gift, but it would be nice if people helped with the gift.
I would be thrilled if they did. I would be very, very happy, especially right now. It's been an interesting journey for me. I'm not stopping, but if people would help out, it would make it a lot easier for me to do the job I'm doing. Jeanne, you look like you want to say something.
I was actually thinking about this as I was thinking about, money in general. We have a tendency to say things like, I don't have the money for that, or things of that nature, which literally cuts us off. And I've been thinking, how do you change that voice in your mind to say, I'm open to constant flow and allow and accept the support I get. It's not an easy thing to do because it's not easy to recognize. So when I woke up this morning and I had that first thought about something I wanted, and I was like, I don't have the money for that right now. I was like, stop. I literally said, stop, rethink this, and say, because I often say you get what you pray from, not what you pray for. I wish I knew who said it first, but if you come from that position of I don't have, then you're going to have more I don't have. And if you come from the position of I have what I need, I have what I desire, that changes the inner discussion in your mind, which is what we've been talking about, how you manifest, how you outpicture in the world. Listen to the voices and change the language inside your head to allow for it. Because if we start with I don't have, then we put a gate, an obstacle. And if we start with I have what I need, we open that gate.
And having said that, let me remind everyone, we have an NLP coach right here today who you can find because I tagged them, and all you need to do is go to the tag and click on there. But who is Jack Austen? I haven't worked with him other than conversations, and the conversations have been wonderful. And we have another NLP coach who's here often, Kimmy Avery. We have an abundance of knowledge on this show, an abundance of diversity. But within that diversity, there's something that brings us together. And that is wanting to grow, wanting to connect with the world and make the world a better place. Look at our shows. Click on the people I have coming to the show. You'd be amazed. I'm amazed that they hang out with me. Some of them every week, some of them every show, but in different varieties. And they all have so much to give to the world. And I am thrilled and happy to have Neville and Jack here, who aren't here every day, and Jeanne here every time I do a show right now. Click on them. There's a lot you can learn from everyone on this show. And Jeanne, you look like you want to say something or add something.
No, we come here to share thoughts and to have a great conversation. And we thank everybody for watching, for subscribing, for commenting, and for being part of the conversation with us.
Thank you, Jeanne. Well said.
I would like to say one last thing. I know this has never happened before. I learned a hard lesson about that adaptation about me that I shared. And that is this: no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And as much as an old saw as that is, it is absolutely true. No 100%. Amount of knowledge that I may have, even from personal experience, is of use to anybody if they don't feel connected with and valued.
Thank you. Neville, you look like you have some words.
No, really. The thing is, I think everyone here is saying the same thing as usual. Go out and practice the right things, because any practice makes permanent, but it's only the right practice that makes perfect.
Thank you. And Jeanne, I'm giving you your last chance for today.
Oh, thank you. At least it's for today. We're going to be back on Thursday to keep this discussion going. I just as a reminder, and Carla will let us know who the guests are. But listen to yourself as much as you learn to listen to others.
Right. Because the more you listen to yourself, the more you're going to stay in that process of joy, because you'll follow that road of joy. And with that, we are really over. Let's just wave goodbye. And guys, I'll talk to you off air. Bye.
Bye.
Happy holidays.